Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Films and Stuff podcast. I'm Ethan, joined by Pete. Hey, Pete. Good morning. How are you?
I am great. How are you?
Ooh, I love the enthusiasm. We are today having our weekly stream or skip segment. I always introduce it, and then I let you recap the rules. So without further ado, please go ahead and recap those rules for our listeners.
Absolutely. So Ethan and I have prepared lists of TV shows and movies for each other to watch. The key is that these are shows that we wouldn't normally watch. Every week, we randomly assign each other one of those shows to watch, and we have to watch at least 2 episodes if it's a series or 30 minutes if it's a movie. And based on that, we determine if that show is worthy of being streamed or skipped.
True. Very well done. If we look back, last week, I had Bad Monkey and Apple TV Plus, which I gave it a 5, a must subscribe. You had Supercell on Netflix that you gave a 1 skip. So we were opposites. I shall go first. And this week I had Kaos, Kaos, on Netflix. And spoiler alert, I gave it a 1 skip. And I shall summarize the show and tell you why. This is a new series. It stars Jeff Goldblum, whom, ever since he was in the original Jurassic Park, I have thought very highly of. And he plays Zeus, the Greek god from Greek and Roman mythology.
Yeah.
And you sound excited.
I love Greek mythology. It's my favorite.
I will say, I actually could use a little bit of schooling in Greek mythology. A lot of what I know actually came from Avengers and Thor. So I could absolutely use a little bit more Greek mythology in my life. And for that reason, I was somewhat enthusiastic about this show. And before I get to the negatives about this show, I will say that it actually does a pretty good job of introducing Zeus, his wife Hera, Poseidon, Hades, Persephone, Dionysus, Medusa, so on and so forth. Can't recall Athena being in it, but yes, that is certainly someone who's in the mythology. So I have to say, from that perspective, I was a little bit enthusiastic because I knew that I could use more. But what this show is I guess classified as black comedy, where it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek and kind of like intentionally ridiculous. Okay. And that's where the humor is supposed to come in. Think of it as, did you ever watch The Good Place?
I did, and I love The Good Place.
All right. I did not watch a lot of The Good Place, but I watched a little bit. But it was very over the top. And the over the topishness is what is intended to give it the humor, right? So much like that, it's supposed to be, I guess, so it's not cheeky. It's not written very, very tightly or witty. It's just supposed to be so over the top that you're supposed to laugh at kind of like the situation. So I have to say, casted very well with Jeff Goldblum as Zeus. And he lives in his massive mansion. And it's kind of styled in a modern day thing, right? So he's not actually wearing, I don't know what Zeus wore in the original mythology. I think of kind of like toga. The togas and the robes and, like the little olive leaves in the hair kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Nope. He is wearing here. Honestly, he looks kind of like a Russian gangster from Rounders. He's wearing a lot of like Adidas, like velour suits, kind of like gold sunglasses. To be honest, there's a lot of like kind of Hugh Hefner inspired smoking jackets and such, right? So he's definitely depicted to be kind of this very wealthy deity but he comes across less like a god and more like just a very, very wealthy old retiree. His issue is that he has a very bad or minimal relationship with, his children. And he does have a lot of children, him and Hera. And some of his children are half-borns or half-bloods, I guess you would say, right? So, he's not clear exactly how, but, they depict him. He's got his, let's call it a harem or his mistress on Earth. And you can see him, doing his thing with them. So apparently he can take a human form as well. And the basis of the story is that Prometheus, apparently behind the scenes, is trying to stir up some problems through some type of prophecy where Zeus and his family will fall, so to speak, and Kaos, K-A-O-S, just like the name of the show, will take over. So apparently behind the scenes, Prometheus is working with 3 different humans, and somehow these humans, although we haven't seen how, will have the ability to topple Zeus and his family. So it's definitely set, I wouldn't say like modern day in the sense that there's not like iPhones, but there are definitely, it seems to be set kind of like in the 90s-ish era. I mean, it's a little bit fuzzy in terms of when it's set, but you can tell it's not exactly today. And it seems to be set in Greece or Crete, somewhere where it's kind of like the real world, but the real world acknowledges that there is Zeus, and Zeus is living in, I guess it's Mount Olympus, right, with his family and so on and so forth. So they have like a bunch of festivals that honor him, and everyone kind of says, I don't know, whatever they say, peace be upon you, whatever it is, to kind of like acknowledge his presence and so forth. So the mythology is acknowledged, as is kind of the underworld. So that's kind of the background of this, is that Zeus is worried that the humans, and potentially with Prometheus's guidance, are unveiling this prophecy to unseat him. And he's trying to, I guess, identify the problem and solve the problem so he can stay all powerful. Not a terribly bad plot, but the show for me fell super, super flat, partially because it is so over the top, from Goldblum and his outfits to his kids. And I mean, so Dionysus, for example, is portrayed just as kind of like this big, partier. And it's just really kind of like over the top and not particularly funny or compelling. I'm really a little bit fuzzy in terms of the play between, Prometheus and these 3 humans that apparently have the opportunity to, bring down Zeus. And then one of the humans, we focus, I guess, the B plot on her personal relationship, which I think is just, I don't know, it makes her seem just like a very awful, horrible human. She seems to have a very dedicated, decent husband. She, is trying to get away from him and, has fallen out of love. And I just don't find that there's really any sympathy or, I guess, charisma of any of these characters. So for me, I watched 2 episodes. I really struggled. I really, really, really struggled. And these were released, all of them at the same time, just 2 weeks ago, end of August. I have no interest whatsoever to watch the remaining 6 episodes. I've been really disappointed. Rotten Tomatoes actually has given this 72%. Average rating is 6.6. Metacritic, also generally favorable, giving it a 69. I'm a little bit, more than a little bit surprised. I'm genuinely shocked. I thought this was just completely rubbish. Maybe, and we can get into this, it's because if you look at Netflix now, there is nothing to watch, like nothing new. I would say this and Umbrella Academy season 4 are probably the only, and a bunch of baking shows are really the only new things that I think have been released in the last couple of weeks that I've seen. For me, this is an absolute skip. And if someone likes it, I would love to speak to them directly to understand what I'm missing about this thing.
Okay, well, I'm definitely going to watch it, at least give it a go, because again, not because I don't trust your rating, but because I love Greek myth.
Okay.
I would love to see if I agree with your take on it, coming from the
As
other
do
side,
I.
as someone who's a little bit
Yeah.
more aware of what's going on in Greek.
You will certainly understand, I think, the relationships between the different characters way better than I will. That being said, I would expect, based on what you've said about your interest in Greek and Roman mythology, I would expect you would say, hey, this is a really interesting take on the topic. Because to be honest, there's not a whole lot, apart from like the MCU, there's really not a whole lot of television that's really covered this thing, right? I mean, there's so many shows about like angels, demons, vampires, and so forth. Not a lot on Greek mythology. I think you'll be interested in that. I am hopeful, and not in a nasty way, that you agree with me that there's no humor or character development in this whatsoever, but that shall remain to be seen.
Right. Okay.
So that is Chaos with a K, Kaos on Netflix that I have given a skip rating. Now, I told in advance when I introduced this, I said last week, I had a must subscribe, you had a skip. Then I flipped it around. I have had a skip. So tell us, Pete, what was your assignment and how did you like it?
I had Presumed Innocent on Apple TV Plus, starring Jake Gyllenhaal, and I binged all 8 episodes in a row. I had a very late night, and
Yep,
that's because this is, spoiler alert, a must subscribe.
I agree.
So let's give a quick background. It's based on a
Yep,
book.
based on a book.
It's a courtroom drama about an investigation. And in that investigation, we learned that the chief prosecutor of the city is a suspect in the murder of a fellow prosecutor from the district attorney's office. So
Yep,
they work together. His colleague is murdered, and he's in charge of finding out whoever did this murder and so forth.
yep.
Here's the twist, and this is not a spoiler because you kind of see this in the trailers. So I wish they hadn't done this in the trailers, but they did.
Yeah,
We immediately learn that he's got a past with this prosecutor and that he's had an affair with her. And he's in a
yep,
loving relationship. He's got 2 wonderful kids. He's got a loving wife. You now have a huge conflict of interest where first he's hired on as the chief litigator who's going to prosecute this case of the woman that he was having an affair with. And then we learn that he's the number one suspect because obviously his DNA is all over the place. And then that the revelation about his affair comes out, so forth. I'm not going to spoil it. It's that good. Like, it's really good. I will say this. First of all, it's a highly tense show. Like, the stakes are, of course, in the grand scheme of things, it's a low stakes series because
yeah.
it's not about the end of the world. It's not about, a life-changing disease
Mhm.
that there's a cure for. It's a courtroom drama about one
Yeah,
guy and his family
yep,
imploding because of this affair coming to light, etc. So it's very tense, but it's low stakes that way. High stakes for him personally, but low stakes otherwise.
yeah. There's no multiverse.
There's no
It's a
multiverse.
a local story. Yeah.
And it's superbly acted.
Hmm.
It's the set designs are, as you would expect, pretty good because again, you don't need a sci-fi thing. This is,
Yep,
courtroom. There's a couple of apartments, there's a couple of houses. There's no thrilling, action sequences. There's no
yep,
high-speed chase through the city, none of that
yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
right? The drama comes from character development and from revelations in the story, not from any crazy set pieces.
yeah,
So in that way, it's as good an intellectual drama as you're going to find.
yeah.
And this is one of the few shows that had an amazing twist
Hmm.
at the end of the series.
Multiple twists, I should say. Like you're right about the reveals because the book story matches up very well to 8 episodes, where it seems like at the end of every episode, there's a good reveal that gets you to kind of like gasp and say, oh, wait a second. Now, does that change everything? Or wait a second, who done it based on that, right? I think the way that they planned out the episodes was very, very compelling.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is that the reason I binged it is because every episode ends. When it ends, you kind of want to continue watching because you're in the hopes of figuring out who did it and how it
Yeah.
happened and why it happened.
Yeah.
And you kind of get an inkling going on, but that reveal at the end of the series was such a mind boggle. And then that double twist at the very end is even more mind boggling. And it's so satisfying. It's not one of those reveals that isn't satisfying. And that's what elevates it from a really strong mooch to a very solid must subscribe.
Yeah. I can also say one of the things that I appreciated about this show is that even though it's pretty grisly in terms of it's about a murder, it's about a lot of, someone's life or prison is at stake, it didn't really bring me down. Sometimes you watch a show like this and you're just like so repulsed. Like you're done with the episode, you're done with the series, you're like, oh man, now I'm just totally depressed. I've lost all my faith in humanity, or like I'm going to have nightmares or something. This, I think, did a very good balance where it didn't seem to get personal and it didn't really bring me down. And I really, really appreciated that in a show, because I don't think I could have continued on if it would have been like hit home too hard and would have like dragged me into like a bad mood.
Yeah. In terms of the story, it was excellent, but what I was surprised by, and I don't know how the justice system works because obviously I've never been in such a situation. But what was so weird to me was how involved the district attorney's office gets in terms of evidence procuring and like the pressure that he's getting or that the prosecutor ultimately gets in finding evidence and, kind of dramatizing this. Like, I feel like that's the job of the detectives. That's the job of the police. That's not really the job of a prosecutor.
Yeah, I think that was, I'm also not an expert on that, but I feel like that was a little bit dramatized as well, where they kind of made it like this political issue, like, oh, you're not going to be reelected if you don't find the murderer. Maybe that was the case in 1987 in Chicago, but I think now Chicago, like, there's not so many reporters and cameras and interviews, about like, one murder. It was a grisly murder for sure.
Absolutely.
The lady was a prosecutor, but it wasn't as though like a mayor or a senator or like a really, really like well-known public figure, was just kind of like, butchered. It was, a crime of passion one way or another.
Yeah. I really want to talk more about it, and I'm happy to continue this discussion offline. And the reason is because even though you and I have a proclivity for spoilering a lot of the things we talk about, this is such a good show that I would not recommend spoiling this for the people.
I don't know if you know the author of the original book, Scott Turow. He is very similar to John Grisham, where he is a lawyer, and he's known for, writing a lot of books like this, so he's got a pretty good set of books. And actually, if you really liked Presumed Innocent, which is actually his first novel, there's a part 2 called Innocent he wrote about 25 years later. It is the same characters and just kind of, it's like a continuation of how this first one ends.
I might want to read the book, but like in terms of the way this story ended, I really, really loved it. Okay.
So that is Presumed Innocent. Pete loved it, has given it a must subscribe on Apple TV Plus. So the roles have been reversed from last week, where I had the must subscribe, you had the skip. This week, I had the skip, you had the must subscribe. Can we get on the same page next week?
Well, I'll tell you what, we have a higher chance of doing it for next week because we are both on Apple TV. Funnily enough, you are going to be in heart of Apple TV's niche in the science fiction world. You're going to be watching Sunny.
Oh my gosh. What do you have on Apple TV Plus this week?
I have a show called Me. Now, I remember seeing a trailer a long time ago, but I haven't seen it yet. I believe it's a superhero show.
Yeah, I think it is as well. Okie doke. Pete, do you want to list off our YouTube jazz so that everyone can tell us if they agree, disagree, or if they've got something to say in terms of the ratings that we gave today?
Absolutely. In fact, you should reach out to us. We are down to a scant 3 or 4 shows on our list of shows to watch.
Yeah, I've got to do some effort there.
Tweet at us at FNS Podcast. DM us on Instagram at Films and Stuff Podcast. And as always, the best thing you can do, like this video, leave a comment below, subscribe to our channel, and hit that bell.
Absolutely right. Listeners, thank you for tuning in today. Pete, appreciate your feedback as well and for giving us some very, very good insight in terms of Presumed Innocent. We will catch everyone next week on the next episode of the Films and Stuff podcast. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.